roughly 10,000 years ago in what is now Turkey, Syria, and northern Iraq. Something extraordinary happened that has only one parallel in the entire history of human-animal relations. An animal that humans had not chosen, had not bred, had not selected, and were not actively trying to keep, walked out of the wilderness and decided to move in with us. It then changed almost nothing about itself. It is the only major companion animal that essentially domesticated itself, and the only one that genetically has barely changed from the wild form it started as. We are going to walk through the story of cat domestication, where it happened, when, why, and how it is still happening today. The cat in your apartment is genetically about 95% identical to a wild African or Near Eastern wildcat. By comparison, a Labrador Retriever shares only about 60% of its functional genome with a wolf. Your cat is, in real biological terms, still mostly a wild animal that has chosen to live with you. The cat domestication story begins with grain. About 12,000 years ago, humans in the Fertile Crescent began the agricultural revolution. We stopped following herds, and we started planting wheat, barley, and pulses in fixed locations. We built villages, we built storage pits and granaries. For the first time in human history, we had concentrated, season-spanning piles of plant-based food that could be raided. Concentrated food attracts mice. House mouse populations, specifically Mus musculus, exploded across the Near East in the early agricultural period. They infested every village, they contaminated the grain stores, they ruined harvests, and then, almost by themselves, they attracted a second species, the Near Eastern wildcat, Felis sylvestris lebica. The wildcat had been living in the region for hundreds of thousands of years, but as a solitary, territorial predator that avoided humans. Now, suddenly, human settlements offered something the wildcat had never had access to before: an unprecedented concentration of small mammal prey in a defended, predator-free zone with year-round food security. The bold wildcats came in. The cautious wildcats stayed in the wild. Over generations, the bold lineages outcompeted the cautious lineages near human settlements. The earliest direct archaeological evidence of human-cat coexistence is shocking. In 2004, a team of French archaeologists working at a site called Chillerocambos on the island of Cyprus uncovered a grave dating to roughly 9,500 years ago. Inside the grave was a human deliberately buried with ceremonial care, 8 inches away from the human, in a position that the archaeologists interpreted as intentional companion burial, was a fully articulated skeleton of a cat. Cyprus is the key detail. Cyprus has no native cat population. There are no wild cats on the island. There never were. Which means that some human around 9,500 years ago cared enough about a cat to put it on a boat, take it across the open Mediterranean Sea to Cyprus, and when the cat died, bury it in a marked grave next to themselves. This is the earliest known direct evidence of human-cat affection. It predates the Egyptian cat cult by 4,000 years. The most precise account we have of cat domestication comes from a 2017 study in Nature Ecology and Evolution. A team led by Eva Maria Geigel and Thierry Grange at the Institute Jacques Monod sequenced ancient DNA from more than 200 cat remains spanning 9,000 years in 3 continents. The findings were precise. All modern domestic cats descend from a single subspecies, Felis sylvestris lebica, the Near Eastern wildcat. Not the European wildcat, not the African wildcat, specifically the Libica subspecies that ranges from northern Egypt through the Levant into Turkey. The genetic signature spread outward from the Fertile Crescent in 2 waves. The first wave, around 8,000 years ago, spread cats along the eastern Mediterranean as agriculture itself spread. The second wave, around 2,500 years ago, spread Egyptian cat lineages out along Phoenician and Greek trade routes. By the year 0 of the Common Era, the descendants of Felis sylvestris lebica were on board ships from Iberia to India. By the year 1000, they were in northern Europe with the Vikings. Within 10,000 years, a single subspecies of wild cat from the Levant spread to every inhabited continent except Antarctica. Here is what is most striking about cat domestication. Compared to dogs, cats have barely changed. In dogs, 10,000 years of selective breeding has produced wild morphological diversity. Chihuahuas and Great Danes share a species, but look nothing alike. Cats, by contrast, look almost exactly like their wild ancestors. Most domestic cats weigh between 8 and 12 pounds, identical to wild Felis lebica. They have the same coat patterns, the same body proportions, the same skeletal structure, the same dietary requirements as their wild ancestors. Behaviorally, the cat retains its wild repertoire. It hunts with the same techniques, it marks territory the same way, it uses the same vocalizations. In one fascinating example, the 2014 Washington University Cat Genome paper by Wesley Warren and colleagues identified only about 13 genomic regions that show clear selection differences between domestic and wild cats. In dogs, the equivalent number is hundreds. The cat has been, in real terms, only lightly modified. The cat that lives in your apartment is still essentially a Neolithic North African desert predator, just with more tolerance for indoor living and a slightly higher comfort threshold around humans. Most companion animals were domesticated through deliberate human action. Wolves were selectively bred for tameness over thousands of years. Horses were captured and broken. Cattle were corralled. Sheep were rounded up. Cats are different. No one captured a wild cat and forced it to live in a Neolithic kitchen. The cats walked in. Biologists call this commensal domestication. The animal enters human company because it benefits from doing so on its own terms without human intervention. The only other major domesticate that arrived through the same pathway is the chicken. Everything else, the dog, the horse, the cow, the goat, the pig, the camel, was domesticated by humans, actively shaping the animal. The cat, uniquely, shaped itself. This is why cats are still partially feral. In every domestic cat population, a small percentage of kittens, if not socialized to humans before about 8 weeks of age, will grow up wild and never accept human contact. In dogs, this is nearly impossible. The wildness has not been bred out of cats because the cat's wildness has never really been bred at all. The cat that lives in your home is a Neolithic decision made by a wild cat that the cat has continued to renew every generation since. So, consider what your cat actually is. An animal that 10,000 years ago made an evolutionary bet. The bet was that human settlements would provide enough food and protection to be worth living near. The bet has paid out for several hundred generations of cats. But the cat has never agreed to be fundamentally changed by the relationship. It keeps its wild body, its wild brain, its wild hunting circuits, and its wild ability to walk away. The dog became a different animal in order to live with you. The cat did not. The cat made room for you and is currently allowing you to share its life on terms it has not really renegotiated since the Fertile Crescent. When a cat shows you affection, you are receiving the courtesy of a wild predator that has chosen, again, in this exact moment, to consider you part of its arrangement. You did not domesticate the cat. The cat is just running the same 10,000-year experiment with you as the latest participant. The cat on your couch is not exactly a pet. It is a guest, a long-term, very comfortable, very particular guest. And it has been a guest in the human household for 100 times longer than your country has existed. Treat it with the respect that history is owed. If you want more on what your cat actually is, hit subscribe. See you on the next one.